The story begins as Jen's affection reveals her loving bond with Joe. Joe's Adweek article showcases his thriving advertising career. Jen playfully praises the confidence behind Joe's professional success. Yet Mayo Clinic needs Jen's answer about a major opportunity. Joe hears Jen is ready to commit to their future. Jen receives Joe's avoidance, leaving their future unresolved. At work, colleagues already treat Joe like their next executive. He enjoys the attention before any promotion becomes official. Barry reminds him that confidence cannot guarantee Terry's decision. He also demonstrates glasses capable of recording everything secretly. The suspicious design amuses Joe, who initially dismisses their usefulness. Still, he understands how easily the glasses capture people unnoticed. Barry learns Joe has entered a random bachelor party chat. Its crude messages reveal strangers preparing a cheap Miami weekend. Their invitation video makes the celebration look especially miserable. Barry watches Joe introduce himself to the mistaken chat. Joe sends money for drinks, instantly winning the stranger's gratitude. That unexpected invitation remains in mind as his presentation begins. Joe's desperate youth slang makes the unlimited pitch painfully embarrassing. Joe faces a painfully silent room after the failed pitch. Joe hears Daniel dismiss the campaign as humiliating. Terry agrees Joe's recent campaigns have failed younger consumers. Even Daniel now appears better suited to understand the account. Joe realizes his experience no longer protects his position. Terry makes landing unlimited the condition for keeping his job. Success would still deliver the executive promotion Joe expected. Failure would brand both Joe and the agency as outdated. Desperate, Joe asks Terry for exactly 72 hours. Terry accepts, placing both promotion and employment within reach. The same deadline also places Joe dangerously close to dismissal. Barry suggests finally opening the independent agency Joe always discusses. Joe refuses to abandon a corporate ladder climbed for 10 years. He initially rejects partying with strangers as an absurd solution. Then the Miami Bachelor chat suddenly becomes usable research. Joe offers to finance everything if the strangers include him. His impulsive decision immediately begins affecting life with Jen. At home, Joe admits the promotion never happened. However, he softens Terry's ultimatum instead of revealing the danger. Jen urges him to stop fearing necessary changes. Joe answers by announcing a work trip to Miami. Jen hears Joe plans to rebuild his pitch in Miami. Jen recognizes that his career again outweighs their future. Joe's kneeling posture gives Jen mistaken hope of a proposal. Her hopeful assumption exposes how long commitment has been delayed. Joe's startled reaction destroys that hopeful moment immediately. He insists job survival leaves no room for marriage. Jen refuses to keep waiting while they are no longer children. The argument ends without resolving either love or career. After landing in Miami, Joe regrets how they separated. Meanwhile, 4 younger friends wait to meet their mysterious sponsor. Their jokes establish how quickly Joe's age will become ammunition. Best man Nick introduces himself and identifies groom Mason. Mason warmly welcomes Joe into the approaching celebration. Hunter and Freshman complete the tightly bonded childhood group. Nick unveils an ambitious itinerary for Mason's final unmarried weekend. His promise of no survivors establishes the reckless tone. Joe boasts that the older guest can out-party everyone. He reinforces that claim with an enormous alcohol delivery. The extravagant gift finally impresses the skeptical friends. Joe promises that their enjoyment is now his responsibility. Conversation reveals Nick is unemployed despite making the invitation video. Nick answers unemployment questions with louder bravado and jokes. Joe also learns Hunter remains wounded by Elizabeth's betrayal. Joe learns why Nick treats this weekend as irreplaceable. The bachelor party therefore carries more emotional weight than advertised. Freshman shows Joe an Arabic guidebook, earning sincere encouragement. Elsewhere, criminals discover strangers occupying their boss's mansion. They quietly increase Joe's fees while monitoring the rental. The group enjoys luxury, financed through a dangerously borrowed mansion. Meanwhile, Joe studies how the friends choose and consume alcohol. Every casual reaction becomes secret material for Unlimited. Freshman soon questions Joe about his unusual personal limits. Freshman hears Joe declare cocaine permanently forbidden. His alarmed reaction suggests that rule comes from experience. The friends dismiss the warning before understanding its importance. Trying to match them, Joe begins coating his stomach with medicine. Their van carries Joe's worsening experiment deeper into Miami. Alcohol completes a reckless combination his body cannot sustain. Before continuing, the friends ban phones and social media. Everyone celebrates a private weekend that will leave no record. Nick then begins their traditional emotional check-in. Mason explains why honest feelings matter, even among new acquaintances. Hunter and Freshman watch Joe avoid the check-in. Soon his intoxication ruins both the mood and their clothing. Embarrassed, Joe promises to replace every damaged item. That attempted repair carries everyone toward another public disaster. An officer questions the older man carrying suspicious cash. Joe faces officers as his friends worsen the explanation. Their truthful answers make the trafficking misunderstanding increasingly convincing. Joe watches the friends initiate their practiced escape. Everyone flees, leaving Joe trapped in a painful chase. Back home, Joe learns Freshman escaped with the badge. Back at work, Barry receives Joe's secretly recorded footage. Its genuine chaos finally gives the campaign an authentic voice. Barry urges Joe to capture much more despite the ban. Joe learns Barry hid recording glasses inside his luggage. Joe recognizes the betrayal but leaves to protect his threatened job. The next morning, he returns to the disappointed group. Hunter and Freshman hear Joe promise a yacht as restitution. A supposed boat contact briefly makes that promise believable. The promised yacht remains inaccessible after the reservation fails. The security guard examines Freshman's stolen badge. The false authority finally pushes the group past security. Joe chooses fraud because another failure might end his access. Once aboard, the friends celebrate him as their unlikely hero. The open water restores the trust Joe nearly destroyed. Victor arrives carrying vodka for the yacht guests. Away from the others, Mason admits he was calling Emily. He lacks traditional stability, but feels certain about marriage. Joe hears how Nick's teasing suppresses Mason's wedding happiness. Joe hears Mason ask what commitment is still waiting for. Jen's missed call follows Joe into the quiet cabin. A crew member orders Loco to inspect the jet skis. Joe wanders deeper inside while searching for food. The armed crew surrounds Joe and begins questioning his identity. They force Joe to prove that he is not a cop. Freshman's stolen badge convinces them Joe may be police. They demand cocaine as proof that he is not undercover. The drug immediately transforms Joe into Ricardo Montana. His friends initially mistake the new behavior for another performance. Ricardo's reckless confidence removes every trace of Joe's fear. He challenges the armed yacht crew as though he controls Miami. Their confusion gives Ricardo enough space to start fighting. His violent rampage spreads from the cabin onto the deck. The friends finally reach the jet skis during the chaos. Ricardo barely recognizes them as they prepare to escape. They speed away while he continues celebrating his imaginary victory. Later, the yacht crew reviews footage of the missing shipment. Ricardo's declaration convinces them a new kingpin attacked. That incomplete story begins spreading throughout Miami. Back together, Joe again intrudes on Nick's plans for Mason. Nick's missing career makes the approaching separation feel worse. Joe correctly identifies the fear, but delivers it cruelly. Nick then gives Mason custody of their lifelong scrapbook. An objection recalls that Nick has always protected the book. The book reveals how completely their friendship shaped both lives. They promise Joe a page if he survives the weekend. For once, inclusion arrives through connection instead of money. Nick's careful handling shows that acceptance still has boundaries. A call from Barry immediately tests Joe's new loyalty. The footage is strong enough to place promotion within reach. Joe receives Barry's final demand for women's perspectives. Meanwhile, strangers recognize Ricardo and salute his supposed power. Joe encourages Hunter to approach someone outside his usual type. He leads Hunter into conversation with the waiting women. At a nightclub, Hunter introduces himself to Scarlett. Scarlett warmly greets Hunter, making his approach feel promising. Freshman privately admits Joe has become important to them. That trust makes the hidden campaign increasingly difficult to justify. Elsewhere, yacht criminals search Miami for the missing Ricardo. Scarlett's group invites the men into a stretch limousine. Joe hears Nick object to continuing with the women. A call from Jen interrupts Joe before he can answer. Joe hears Jen will move out before his return. Joe finally admits the relationship is collapsing. Mason responds with a simple test instead of empty comfort. He first asks whether Joe genuinely loves Jen. Joe hears Mason ask whether he wants life with Jen. Mason receives Joe's immediate yes to both questions. Joe then urges Mason and Nick to discuss their own conflict. Their scrapbook proves that marriage cannot erase shared history. For a moment, Mason hopes both friendships can survive. Joe's conversation is interrupted by another round of shots. The limousine begins spinning as every man grows weak. One passenger after another slips into unnatural sleep. One robber confirms the drinks were a coordinated trap. After blackout, all 5 men awaken on shore. They check one another before confronting the unfamiliar beach. Phones, wallets, and every useful possession have disappeared. The theft confirms Nick's suspicions about Scarlett's crew. Freshman still worries about the women before understanding their betrayal. Then Nick discovers the robbers also stole the scrapbook. Without money or transport, the loss becomes even more painful. The friends begin walking because remaining still offers nothing. The group realizes they are stranded on a tiny island. Its size makes finding help seem nearly impossible. Their fear briefly becomes an absurd cannibalism joke. A passing fisherman soon appears to offer rescue. The crowded fishing boat carries them back toward Miami. Lock storage turns the uncomfortable ride into something suspicious. Freshman reads Japanese markings and identifies himself as a hyper-polyglot. His translation reveals dozens of illegally harvested whale organs. Online research lets freshmen explain their supposed medicinal value. Then the Coast Guard orders the smuggling vessel to stop. The smugglers refuse to surrender their extremely valuable cargo. They abandon the helm while leaving the friends locked below. The trapped passengers realize nobody is steering the boat. A collision becomes inevitable unless they escape immediately. The locked hatch refuses to open under their first efforts. Joe organizes everyone into one coordinated strike. Their usual confusion nearly ruins the carefully counted attempt. Once free, they grab floating cargo and leap overboard. The exhausted friends barely reach land after swallowing seawater. Relief lets their ridiculous humor return almost immediately. Then a jellyfish stings Joe directly across the face. Freshman's research suggests an appalling treatment using the whale cargo. Joe reluctantly submits, while the others mock his suffering. Afterward, Mason acknowledges that Joe saved everyone aboard. He invites Joe to the wedding as part of their family. Joe accepts, finally earning what his money could not buy. Elsewhere, the crime boss demands answers about his missing cocaine. The mansion records let his crew identify Joe as the renter. Their separate clues now point toward the same unsuspecting target. Back at the house, the friends locate their stolen phones. Instead, Joe's computer exposes photographs and videos of them. The hidden folder reveals a campaign built from their weekend. Unlimited bottles suddenly expose why Joe funded everything. The friends understand their private lives became professional material. Joe's real affection can no longer excuse the deception. Nick absorbs Joe's claim that Mason resents his ridicule. Mason finally admits Nick's ridicule has poisoned his engagement joy. Nick's joking defense no longer works for his oldest friend. Furious, Nick destroys Joe's campaign project. Joe protests despite having violated every boundary they established. Hunter compares the deception to the betrayal that broke him. Hunter witnesses Mason order Joe out of their friendship. The rejection leaves Joe without another performance to hide behind. Alone again, he has lost Jen, work, and friendship. Joe follows a phone signal and finds Scarlett's next victims. The robbers are already preparing another unsuspecting group. Joe warns the men before they drink the drugged alcohol. Joe faces the robbery crew's violent ultimatum. This fight is finally about protection rather than professional gain. Scarlett reels after Joe accidentally strikes her during the struggle. Joe recovers the friend's scrapbook, but expects no forgiveness. Then the friends reveal that yacht criminals kidnapped Mason. Their angry reunion instantly becomes a desperate rescue conference. Joe forces everyone to explain the danger clearly. The captors demand 30 kilos of cocaine by 8 o'clock. A burner phone carries their warning against contacting police. The stolen jet skis become the group's only remaining clue. Opening one compartment finally reveals the hidden cocaine. The enormous quantity explains why the criminals pursued Ricardo. A new call confirms the gang knows they found it. Joe tries negotiating under his real identity. The captors refuse to speak with anyone except Ricardo. Recreating that persona now seems like their only option. Hunter watches the group prepare cocaine for Joe. The first small attempt produces no transformation. Joe fears another dose could cause a fatal overdose. Panic pushes the group too far, finally restoring Ricardo. The fictional kingpin immediately demands control of the conversation. Ricardo recognizes that the missing drugs create a serious problem. He invents a powerful partnership with the Yakuza. His grotesque threats make the lie sound convincingly dangerous. Freshman's Japanese performance supplies the missing proof. Together, they negotiate a cocaine for Mason exchange. The group gathers the stash and races toward the meeting. Their improvised criminal costumes complete the dangerous bluff. Unfortunately, the cocaine begins wearing off before arrival. Joe must enter the exchange without Ricardo's confidence. Mason remains alive and notices their ridiculous wardrobe change. The boss mocks Joe's claim to rule Miami. The boss claims his own call exposed the Yakuza lie. With guns nearby, the boss demands Ricardo's true identity. Joe finally admits Ricardo Montana has never been real. The boss hears Joe explain how cocaine creates Ricardo. Mason and the boss hear Joe accept the theft. Nick watches the boss absorb Joe's protection of the group. The boss ridicules Joe's fabricated persona and stolen disguise. Unexpectedly, the crime boss begins crying at Joe's clothing. The borrowed outfit carries memories of his late father. Shared grief replaces the violence both groups expected. The boss introduces his son as proof that family changed him. Jonathan asks his father to call him Jays. Their affectionate argument makes the lesson impossible for Joe to ignore. The boss urges him to prioritize the people he loves. Real commitment means choosing those people permanently. The boss releases Mason alive and orders the stash recovered. The boss reclaims the coat but lets Joe keep the pants. Everyone leaves astonished that honesty prevented bloodshed. Hunter and Mason receive Joe's praise for Freshman's performance. He recommends using those languages professionally at the United Nations. Finally, Joe apologizes for exploiting and nearly destroying the weekend. The friends remember everything but still promise scrapbook inclusion. Their acceptance overwhelms Joe because it cannot be purchased. Joe responds by encouraging them to protect their circle. Nick confirms that loyalty now extends in both directions. Their chaotic Miami experience ends with genuine friendship restored. Joe receives Barry's apology and news that the drive survived. Barry turns the surviving footage into a surprisingly strong campaign. Unlimited may survive, but Joe's priorities have fundamentally changed. Back in New York, Joe struggles to begin with Jen. Jen hears Joe answer Mason's questions with complete honesty. Jen recognizes the quiz, but still understands his intention. Joe no longer cares about saving his promised promotion. He will build his own company and relocate near Jen. Most importantly, Joe refuses to lose their shared future. Jen accepts the apology, and they choose each other again. Their reconciliation carries them forward toward a permanent commitment. Later, work tries intruding during Mason and Emily's wedding. Joe refuses because the celebration now matters more. Joe confirms Barry brought Unlimited into their new agency. Joe credits the younger friends with changing his entire perspective. The wedding gathers everyone who survived the Miami disaster. During the final emotional check-in, Mason feels married. Nick proudly reports that he has finally found employment. Hunter no longer feels trapped inside his romantic slump. Freshman unexpectedly admits that marriage now appeals to him. Mason's happiness has transformed how Freshman imagines adulthood. The friends welcome that vulnerable admission without ridicule. Joe hints that he may soon need his own bachelor party.